I love this question. And this is a genuine question, right? If you're coming on here to do ad hominem attacks, I will just hit back at you and you'll probably end up being embarrassed on a public forum. But if you ask a legitimate question about my faith or you want to challenge me on something in an intellectually curious way, I'm happy to entertain it. So you've asked, where's the halakhic authority for elders and deacons? And that's an excellent inquiry, particularly because if we're going to believe anything that's in the New Testament, it has to come from the Tanakh, the Hebrew scriptures. Now, before I get to the question, I know that there is a lot of animosity between Nazarenes and Jews because of their different opinions on matters of faith, i.e., the fact that there's a derogatory term for our Messiah called the acronym Yeshua, which means in Hebrew, may his name be blotted out. Many secular Jews are not aware that this is a thing that even exists. Many messianics end up conflating it and thinking that that means Yeshua is a curse word instead of the Hebrew word for salvation. There are also a lot of messianic believers who conflate Iesus with Zeus, even though that transliteration of Yeshua the Messiah's name just uses sigma and does not use a zeta if you were to learn the Greek alphabet. Don't mind me, I've got ADS, so I've got to share every little curiosity that I have or every little thing that I'm looking into. So let me address the second thing you asked first, where you say, where in Moses' law is it said circumcision would become baptism? Absolutely nowhere. Circumcision is an outward representation of your desire to serve God faithfully. However, it does not necessarily equate to baptism or mikveh. Now, as far as rabbinic custom goes, generally you did brit milah or circumcision before tevilah, before baptism, and then you offered sacrifices at a good standing temple. This is what we would call the Gier process. I'm not here to get into that today, though. But just note that almost everybody treats those things as separate components. So, getting to your real question, in Exodus chapter 18 and verse 17, we read, but Moses' father-in-law, Yitro, said to him, the thing you are doing is not right. You will surely wear yourself out and these people as well. For the task is too heavy for you. You cannot do it alone. So this calls for plural headship because you have to divide up the load. Now listen to me. I will give you counsel, wise counsel, and God be with you. You represent the people before God. You bring the disputes before God and enjoin upon them the laws and the teachings and make known to them the way they are to go and the practices they are to follow. You shall also seek out from among you capable men who fear God, trustworthy men who spurn ill-gotten gain, meaning these people are not greedy. They're not in these positions of power to try to get wealthy. And we're going to see parallel language in the New Testament. Set these over them as chiefs of thousands, hundreds, fifties, and tens. Let them judge the people at all times. And this reminds me of a text in the New Testament as well. Have them bring every major dispute to you, but let them decide every minor dispute themselves. Make it easier for yourself by letting them share the burden with you. If you do this, and God so commands you, you will be able to bear up, and all these people, too, will go home unwearied. Moses heeded his father-in-law, meaning a wise person heeds counsel, and did just as he had said. Moses chose capable men out of all Israel, meaning they were able and competent to teach, and appointed them heads over the people, chiefs of thousands, hundreds, fifties, and tens, and they judged the people at all times. The difficult matters they would bring to Moses, and all the minor matters they would decide themselves. Then Moses bade his father-in-law farewell and went his way to his own land. So God says to appoint Anshe, who are of renown, meaning these are people who are well respected in the community for their faith walk and their ability to offer wisdom. Now notice we have two groups of people here. We have the men of renown who are appointed as the judges and officers to preside over legal cases. And then we have the elders in verse 12. And Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, took a burnt offering and sacrifices for God. And Aaron came and all the elders of Israel to eat bread with Moses' father-in-law before God. Now the Hebrew word for elder, which is Strong's 2205 or zaken, can mean ancient man, bearded one, or even senator. So this is someone who is aged and therefore has life experience. Now, in the Hebrew text of Exodus 18, we see that these people would have been husbands, they would have been fathers, they would have been champions according to the literal Hebrew translation. So let's see what Paul says regarding two groups of people in the New Testament form of governance. So the Israelite form of governance presented in 1 Timothy chapter 3 and verse 1 doesn't deviate away from the Torah. And we go all the way down to verse 12. He says, "Here's a trustworthy saying. Whoever aspires to be an overseer desires a noble task. Now the overseer is to be above reproach, faithful to his wife," meaning no serial marriages and divorces, "temperate, self-controlled, respectable, hospitable, able to teach, not given to wine, not violent but gentle, not quarrelsome," and then here we go, here's the parallel from Exodus, "not a lover of money, not someone who is greedy for gain. He must manage his own family well." Basically, he must demonstrate competence with a small group of people and see that his children obey him, and he must do so in a manner worthy of respect. Before he can be a senator of many, he must be a senator in his own household. If anyone does not know how to manage his own family, how can he take care of God's church? He must not be a recent convert, or he may become conceited and fall under the same judgment as the devil. Basically, if someone's a new convert and they're given a position of authority, they may fall into the Dunning-Kruger effect, where they don't know too much, but they think they know it all. He must have a good reputation with outsiders, meaning unbelievers, so that he will not fall into disgrace and into the devil's trap. He says, in the same way, deacons are to be worthy of respect, sincere, not indulging in much wine, and not pursuing dishonest gain. So again, parallel from Exodus there with not being greedy for gain. They must keep hold of the deep truths of the faith with a clear conscience, meaning they can't have anxiety over sin. They can't have anything that's bothering them or getting in the way between them and Yahweh. They must first be tested, and then if there is nothing against them, let them serve as deacons. So Paul is saying, give them rigor, question them, interrogate them, and then let them serve as deacons. In the same way, the women are to be worthy of respect, not malicious talkers, but temperate and trustworthy in everything. So if you can see that the woman is trustworthy and temperate, then that reflects well on the man, and therefore let him serve as a deacon. But here you don't see anything about women preachers. You don't see anything in the book of Exodus about women leaders in the Israelite community. So Paul finishes off, a deacon must be faithful to his wife, no adultery, no serial marriages and divorces, and must manage his children and his household well. Now, Strong's Greek 1249 tells us that the word for deacon is diakonos, and therefore this is why it's not designed for someone immature in the faith, because it's a servile role. It's not putting yourself above other people. In fact, it's the opposite. Now we see that it could mean an attendant, a servant, a waiter, as in like a restaurant waiter, if you will, and basically a male Christian serving in a specific function and post, either to teach, to pastor, to tend to the widows and the poor. So basically, if you operate in an assembly setting, think of it as someone who runs errands, because that's the literal meaning. Think of it as someone who gets the food ready for Shabbat fellowship, for oneg. Someone who serves the food for Shabbat fellowship, or oneg. Someone who puts the needs of the congregation before their own. Because as a husband, they already need to be able to put the needs of their children and of their household before their own needs. So until they've actually mastered that art, they cannot be operating in a congregational setting, at least in a headship position. Now, when Yeshua had the apostles help him pass out loaves and fishes, he also organized them in a deacon-type fashion. In Mark 6:39, then Jesus directed them to have all the people sit down in groups on the green grass. More parallel language from Exodus, continuing to verse 40. So they sat down in groups of hundreds and fifties. It's as if Yeshua made them chief over these groups of people. In the next video, I want to get to how deacons and elders were appointed in the New Testament and why Orthodox Christians are correct in employing this system.